The alert arrived in Washington on a Wednesday morning, and it did not travel through quiet back channels or carefully worded leaks from unnamed officials feeding sympathetic journalists. It was formal, signed, and official, bearing the names of the heads of government of the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and Canada, delivered at the same moment to the White House, the State Department, and the Office of the United States Trade Representative at 9 a.m. Central European Time. 6 nations, 1 document, 1 deadline, 48 hours. The document never used the word ultimatum, though anyone reading between the lines understood exactly what it meant. It stated that the 6 nations had determined that the current path of American trade policy could no longer be made compatible with a functioning G7, and unless the United States committed to pausing unilateral tariff escalation, those countries reserved the right to activate alternative frameworks. That 48-hour window closed on a Friday morning. Trump chose wrongly, and the $620 billion error that followed keeps growing. To truly understand the scale of this miscalculation, one must first understand what the G7 actually is. It is an informal forum for economic governance, holding no legal authority, carrying no enforcement powers, and maintaining no permanent secretariat. Yet it was held together for decades by a shared understanding that the 7 largest economies would coordinate on trade, money, and fiscal policy with stability as the common goal rather than unilateral gain. For decades, this arrangement held because 7 major economies acting in isolation would each fare worse than when operating within the bounds of coordinated restraint. No G7 member had ever before delivered a collective formal ultimatum, not during the Plaza Accord of 1985, not during the financial collapse of 2008, and not during any previous trade or monetary disagreement. A former G7 Sherpa described the Wednesday document as the institutional equivalent of a no-confidence vote, a sign of extraordinary strain. The White House was given 48 hours to respond, and the internal debate between National Security Council officials who viewed the letter as an aggressive show of unity and Treasury officials who grasped the economic power and operational readiness behind the alternative frameworks consumed nearly all of that time. The reply sent with just 4 minutes remaining restated a commitment to fair trade but offered no meaningful pause on tariffs, which Germany formally described as non-responsive. When the frameworks were activated, the $620 billion miscalculation began to take shape. The Coordinated Tariff Reciprocity Protocol targeted specific American exports including agricultural goods, spirits, motorcycles, and financial services. A dollar diversification compact shifted $340 billion in trade away from dollar invoicing, and a supply chain resilience initiative directed $180 billion in investment to reduce American participation across 14 sectors, producing structural changes that would not easily be undone. The combined measurable consequences included $47 billion in agricultural export losses, $290 billion in dollar-related borrowing cost increases, $180 billion in redirected investment, and $13 billion in displaced manufacturing exports. And the costs that cannot yet be measured, supply chain adjustments, shifted investment decisions, and new long-term partnerships continue to compound. The administration's failure was not simply an intelligence gap. It was a conceptual failure rooted in an outdated assumption that allies would always prioritize alliance preservation above trade grievances. In reality, the 6 governments recognized that the shift in American economic strategy was structural, not temporary, and quietly began building new frameworks that did not require American centrality. The 48-hour document was not a negotiating move. It was a farewell notice written in the language of a final offer. At the G7 summit that followed, the American delegation walked into frameworks that were already running. The United States found itself receiving briefings rather than sitting at bilateral negotiating tables, abstaining from trade, monetary, and economic governance statements across 2 communiques, and watching a formally fractured G7 become institutional reality. The $620 billion is both a concrete economic figure and a structural signal, marking a generational repositioning away from American centrality, with capital and systems built under these new initiatives creating lasting facts on the ground. Historical parallels worth drawing include the Nixon administration's 1971 suspension of dollar-gold convertibility and the Bush administration's 2003 invasion of Iraq. Both were decisions whose full consequences took years to become clear. The 6 governments sent the 48-hour warning as insurance against over-reliance on American centrality. As of the most recent reports, the White House has issued no substantive response, only public statements and technical-level conversations, leaving the frameworks active and the costs still accumulating. The 2 communicate G7 is now institutional reality. The allied governments have crossed the line from choice to consequence. The 48 hours the administration was given for decisive action became instead a precedent-setting structural shift in global economic governance. And the $620 billion reflects only the opening chapter of a far larger story still unfolding.